Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast, where we dive into the real talk of business success and innovation. Today, we're thrilled to have a titan of the tech and marketing world, Frank Piuck, the esteemed founder of CyberHenge Incorporated, with a storied career spanning over 25 years, an impressive stint at Fortune 500 companies, and an MBA from Columbia University. Frank is here to share his treasure trove of knowledge, from the intricacies of marketing engineering to the architecture of successful organizations. Frank's insights are gold for anyone looking to scale their business or carve out a niche in the digital landscape. So buckle up as we explore the mind of a master strategist who not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. Let's get started.
Welcome to Inappropriate Growth, the podcast where we get real about the grind behind the glory. I'm Paul, your host, and I'm here to take you on a journey through the untold stories of business triumphs. We might raise some eyebrows, but it's all about the hustle and we don't fit the mold. Here we're talking about the kind of effort that doesn't just push the envelope, it shreds it to pieces. We're building a community where the norm is to defy norms. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the beginnings that were anything but humble. The times when giving up seemed like the only option. We'll also dig into all of those wild, insane, and out-of-the-box strategies that led to massive growth. From growth hacks to best practices, this podcast will be fast, furious, and should be a whole lot of fun. Join us as we redefine what it means to grow and turn business growth into an art form. Welcome to Inappropriate Growth.
Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. I have with me today Mr. Frank Piuck. I'm very excited to have him on our show, and I'm going to let him tell you about where he is, why he's there, and what he's doing now.
Thank you for having me. I am building a consulting practice around the notion of business architecture, because in my experience, as businesses grow and evolve, things that worked stop working. There are gaps. There were structures and gaps that were structures that were adequate, and now there are gaps. And there are structures that were adequate that are now in the way. That policies and procedures that worked at one scale don't work at another. Policies and procedures that work in one market don't work in the next. And if you're trapped in the day-to-day and you're managing with 100 people asking you 100 questions every day, it's hard to see all the things that are underlying your issues. And somebody coming in from outside with the right training and the right background can really make a difference in helping you simplify the process, address the most important issues first, and enable you to manage better and grow faster.
And you are in Brooklyn, New Jersey?
I am in Oakland, New Jersey.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I am a native of Brooklyn, but I live in Oakland, New Jersey, which is about almost exactly 20 miles from the George Washington Bridge. So an easy ride to Manhattan.
Got it. Okay. Well, I on Inappropriate Growth, we like to talk about early inspirations, and wonder if you could share a pivotal moment from your early career that you would say ignited your entrepreneurial spirit.
Well, my father was an entrepreneur before I was born. He had a machine shop. By the time I was old enough to know anything about what he was doing, he was working for a larger company as plant manager, and he was building the machinery to make it run efficiently. And he was telling me 30 years later all the things he did when I was 6 years old that were so impressive. He really was an amazing engineer. But you don't see your father that way when you're little. Couldn't even understand the stuff. Wouldn't have been able to understand that stuff. And by the time I was a teenager, he was the plant manager of a candle factory, a partner in a small business. There was one of 5 partners, and he basically ran the factory. He figured out new kinds of equipment. He designed the equipment. He had supervised the people who built the equipment. He installed the equipment. Worked for him summers. Worked for him after college for a couple of years. This is a good way to live, to have control over your life and to direct people, give them guidance, and help them do their work better. And then I had, in the course of many jobs, I worked for a company called Creative Output that was founded by an Israeli physicist who came to business almost like a blank slate. He was a physicist. He was a scientist. He looked at things in scientific terms. He wasn't raised with any of the management paradigms. And he had some math. A friend of his told him, you can schedule a factory with this. He found out that, in fact, using this mathematical toolkit, building a system that would model the factory and schedule the plant, he could improve the output of many factories enormously. And then he found out that sometimes the companies who bought the software couldn't use it properly because of internal policies. So there was one story that they told me when I first joined the company. They had done a demo for a major automotive plant, I think. And the plant manager saw the demo. He said, "That's awesome. I wish I could use it." And they said, "Why can't you use it?" He said, "Well, I'm not sure they'd fire me, but they would definitely kill my bonus because this breaks all these rules that I have to live with. The cost accountants want the cost per piece to be low, and this is going to change. This ignores cost per piece. And yeah, you get everything through the factory faster. And yeah, you actually spend less money, but the accounting cost per piece will go up, and I will get killed."
In your 25 years of experience, what is one of the most significant challenges you've faced and how did you overcome it?
Biggest challenge for a solo entrepreneur is always finding prospects and converting prospects into customers. And I can't say I've overcome it as well as I'd like to. I'm working on it. In challenges for clients, and I've got a big one right now. I've got a client who wants to grow and has outgrown all of its very minimal systems and is trying to build them and grow at the same time. And my job is to see the holes and tell them what they are and help them prioritize and choosing which ones to fix first, what to build and when to build it.
One of those realities where you're repairing the airplane in flight, not in the hangar.
I think every business is to some extent repairing the airplane in flight. Because as the business grows, the problems change. The thing that worked for you last year isn't enough or might even be in the way. And you have a new business opportunity, which is a slightly different market, and your customer expectations are different. And again, all the things that you know how to do are not sufficient to address this new customer base, and you need to rethink how you work, and you need to make sure that customers are happy, and you need to make sure that the systems are in place to keep the customers happy. And you're a public company, you need to keep the stockholders happy. There's an awful lot of ongoing repair on that airplane that you can't stop flying.
You've worked with Fortune 500 companies. You've also worked with startups that may or may not have started. But having worked with both, what would you say the key differences? You just mentioned stockholders and their opinions, but what differences have you observed in their approaches to business growth?
I think the startup is desperately trying to figure out who the customer is and what to sell them, and it's always an iterative process because you're not aligned, and it takes a lot of work to get aligned, and you may not have the time to get aligned because the cash flow isn't what you need it to be, and you have to take the customers that'll hire you, whether they're the ideal customer or not. You outgrow that to some point. You have some measure of stability, and you have systems in place, and you have higher speed people who have specialties who know what they're doing. When you get above a certain size, is that your specialists don't understand what the other guys are doing. So inevitably, the marketing people and the salespeople are saying, if you're not doing what I'm doing what you need me to do, and you're not doing what you need to do, right? The salespeople say the marketing people say, we're giving you all these customers and you're not closing them. And the salespeople say, you're giving me all these inappropriate customers that I shouldn't be closing. And they're pointing fingers at each other. The the factory guy is measured on the cost per piece, and the purchasing manager is measured on the cost per piece. So they're incentivized to buy lots of things, because the more you buy, the lower the price. The longer the production lot, the lower the unit cost, because you amortize the setup costs. And in the meantime, the materials manager, he's trying to keep the inventory down and the working capital low, and he's inherently in conflict with the purchasing and the manufacturing managers.
And it's usually kind of heartbreaking that the person that got you to your first million is absolutely useless to you to get you to the second million. But then there's another level where, like you said, we've got all these specialists, but do they really know what the other, when it's one person is the specialist of three different things, they know exactly what they're doing.
I've built a lot of websites, and I have a business background, but most people who build websites are either coming out of art school or IT school, and they're not teaching them business. So there are an awful lot of website designers who are thinking that pretty is matters. Well, you can have a gorgeous website that doesn't convert at all. You can have an ugly website that works really well if the copy is good. How does the web designer who doesn't have any business background know what makes a good website? And if you are a shoe store, have no graphic design background and very little marketing background, you can sell shoes. How do you tell the web designer what that website should be? You go to the web designer and they say, here's what we think, and you trust them, and they give you a website and it looks really pretty. And you have no basis even to know whether it's a good website or a bad site, whether you could do better or worse, and how to change it.
And you'll probably inherit their metrics, because you're just like with marketing. I measure marketing by how many times the phone rings. Marketers measure it by organic actuations and SEO rankings and things that matter not to a shoe store salesman. They just want to know, are we selling more shoes?
Yep.
Or do we at least have the opportunity to sell more shoes because of this online presence? And you're right. I've never thought about that, but the website design people, for the most part, are not coming from Wharton. They're not coming from MBA backgrounds. They're coming from tech.
Yep. Or art school.
Yeah.
They get taught WordPress in art school, and they understand the tech well enough to make a website look the way they want it to look. And maybe it has the bells and whistles to make it do things you want it to do that are aesthetic.
Well, you've been working since the beginning of the internet. I'm curious, since we're talking about marketing, how has the field of marketing evolved just during your career, and what are the most impactful changes you've implemented at Cyberhinge?
Well, in the mid 90s, we were on dial-up, right? And a photograph was a big file. And so a large, high-quality picture was going to take minutes to load, and you couldn't do it. You had to come with a compromise on size and picture quality, and it was good enough. And you could do things that would shrink the image file size that weren't visible to any but a really well-educated eye. But you didn't have a lot of images. Now we're inundated in images to the point where people say, oh, you can't have text. People don't want to read on your website. It's all got to be pretty, and it's got to be imagery, and it's got to be video and audio, and it's a website is a TV commercial turned into a set of files that sit on the internet. They're not wrong about all of it, but I really think that the copy and the message on the website remains the most important thing. That if you have a boring, bland website that says the right things, you're going to convert better than with a gorgeous website that doesn't say the right things. Best of both worlds is you have both. But if I was brought in to be the fractional marketing director of a medium-sized company, and they said, there's a fight between the copywriter and the website designer, I would go with the copywriter 9 times out of 10.
Right. Well,
And
and it's changing. I mean, I know enough to know marketing and sales are different. I kind of feel that sales hasn't changed in thousands of years, but marketing changes every 6 months, or maybe faster.
it changes faster and faster. I mean, think about this. The first person who hired a celebrity to endorse a product probably made a mint, because it was so unusual. It was unique. And the celebrity could get you attention that couldn't be gotten anywhere. Of course, it was a print ad in a newspaper for perfume, perhaps, or something, or in a magazine. But you and it had a very limited audience. It was probably an expensive product, but nonetheless, that first ad with the celebrity endorser probably made a fortune for the celebrity and the advertiser.
My idea was my experience with law firms. It was not that long ago, at least in the state of Louisiana, early 80s, they made advertising legal for the first time. Prior to the early 80s, you could not advertise your law firm but for announcing opening a new office. That was a classified type ad. There was no TV, there was no radio, there was no print, there was no advertising for law firms. Well, as soon as they made that legal, there was a little personal injury lawyer from a small town not too far from New Orleans, Louisiana. He played high school football with Bobby Hebert, and Bobby Hebert was the quarterback for the Saints, and the Saints were winning games for the first time ever. And he got Bobby Hebert to come on TV and with this horribly thick accent tell him, you need to go to my friend Tommy's law firm and use him. If you get in a car accident, he can, get you help. That lawyer was just inundated with business, so much business that he lost control of his trust account and ended up losing his license because he had so much business because it was new. I mean, they'd had celebrity endorsements before, but this was new. The idea now, I don't care where you live, I'm pretty sure lawyers have hired local football or baseball or basketball players to do their commercials. And it's not a lot effective, but it's very expensive. But when that first happened, I guess it was the same thing because it went from not being allowed to being allowed, and it broke his poor law firm.
There's a cautionary tale in there for everybody, and not necessarily about who endorses you in your first ad. It's that if you grow too fast, you can lose control. And
it's a problem.
And so I mentioned Ellie Goldwright earlier. His first client was a friend of his who had a little factory. They put his software in. The factory productivity improved. They made much more stuff than they ever could make before, more than they could sell, and the factory went broke because they outproduced the market. Yeah. And so be careful what you wish for, because you may get it.
Well, that gets us back to architecture, organizational architecture, right? I mean,
yes.
What are the foundational elements of organizational architecture that you believe are essential for a business to scale successfully?
Well, the first thing is humility. The second thing is you have to understand that what got you here doesn't get you there. That what is an invaluable policy or procedure at one level of scale is inappropriate and in the way at another level of scale. And that one of the key things that happens to many businesses, they get to a certain level and they say, we need to hire professionals. We need to hire people who've been there, done that. And the people who come in, been there and done that, don't actually understand the business they've been hired into. And they impose some very classic cost accounting methods. And those classic cost accounting methods made a great deal of sense in the 1920s when overhead was low and labor was large. And now labor is such a small component of most manufacturing, for example, that you manage on the basis of what worked in the 1920s, and you're doing your business a disservice. So, do you remember International Harvester? It was a major agricultural firm. They made harvesting machines, but they also made the first SUV. It was called the International Scout, and it
My
was
mom had one. I remember we had one. It was 4-wheel drive. It was the precursor to the Explorer or the Excursion or
right,
the.
exactly, and it was a very successful product. They brought in a guy from Ford Motor Company to be the CEO, and they said, manage this. And he said, oh, well, the first thing we'll do is we're going to evaluate all the costs and we'll outsource everything that we can outsource cheaper than we can make. And so every year he would cut costs by 300 million and their profits would go down by 300 million. How does that work? And nobody could figure it out. So he kept doing what he was doing, which was every time he outsourced something, he did it on the basis of the fully loaded cost of making this, counting materials, counting labor, counting overhead, is this, and we can buy it for this less thing. They didn't say, but we have to apply the overhead to what we buy. So there was a disconnect, and what they were buying was more expensive than making it in-house. In the meantime, the union's getting upset because they're reducing the workload. And it was UAW plant. So you're getting labor trouble. And every time you do one of these rounds of outsourcing, you've decreased the base for the overhead and increased the percentage of overhead so that things that were in line with external prices now seem more expensive. And basically the company had to go into bankruptcy and emerged as Navistar International and has never recovered its stature. And it was because they brought in somebody who was very expert in misinformation. He did not know what he was doing wrong. He was following the logic that he had been taught, and he wrecked the company.
Oh, I love the story. I mean, I'm how random that not a lot of people's mom had an IH Scout SUV back in 79 or 80 or whatever year that was.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom had one, and she loved it because my little brother was in a car seat. She's like, it is so nice to put him, to lean over, pull the seat forward, and try to get them in a station wagon. It sat up high. She was at a safer level. It was basically like driving a pickup truck. She loved it. You're known for your engaging style. You're known for telling stories. How has storytelling played a role in your business strategy and leadership?
I'm trying to talk about things that are very complex and very abstract. So telling stories makes it much more real and makes it much more engaging. And it's an invaluable part of the selling process, invaluable part of the marketing process.
I would agree. Well, in what ways would you tailor your message to connect with different audiences, from corporate boardrooms or entrepreneurial workshops, with different deadlines?
Good question, and I don't have a good answer. You talk to your audience, you talk to the people you're talking to, and you try different things, and what resonates you keep using, what doesn't resonate you don't, and it's quirky and it's individual. And you have to know the business jargon when you're talking to people in different businesses. So that's one reason you don't sell everything to everybody, because you can't know all the different languages unless you're a huge corporation. If you're a soloist, you gotta say, okay, who can I talk to in the same language, the same way, so that I don't have to tailor every message uniquely to every person I talk to, because that takes so much time.
Well, can you discuss a time when you had to pivot? I mean, what was the biggest pivot in business strategy? I mean, that was dramatic in response to the market changing.
Well, this is not business architecture. It goes back to the website design phase of the Cyberhenge history. Um, the pandemic hit. I had a whole bunch of clients who were people who sold art at art fairs, whether they were antiques dealers selling at antique shows or artisans creating jewelry and ceramics and quilts selling at craft fairs. And there were no craft fairs and there were no antique shows. Everything had been shut down. How did these people make a living? They needed e-commerce websites in a way they never had before. I had a whole bunch of clients who were quite content with their websites, but they couldn't sell directly from them. They had to hope the phone would ring. There was no way somebody could click on a button and put a credit card in and buy something. So how was I going to help them build stores in a cost-effective way? Well, Zoom came to the rescue. I mean, there were Wix and Weebly and Squarespace are all pretty good platforms for selling modest amounts of products. Uh, and so I would teach clients, we're going to rebuild your website together. We're going to do it in Zoom, and I'm going to make you do all the work. And I'm going to make you do all the work because if I show you, it's going to look easy, and then you're going to be frustrated when you do it without me. But if I make you do the work, I can hold your hand, and I can guide you, and I can make sure that you click the right button at the right time, and we'll practice this enough so you're good at it. And basically, I started teaching people to build their own websites. And I found that I really liked it. And one, because I guess I really like teaching. And two, I thought they were better off. I had clients who would not keep their websites up to date because they didn't want to spend the money on having me do the work. If I taught them how to do it themselves, they had the exact same amount of work. They had to take the picture, they had to write the description, they had the price, but they could, instead of sending me an email with all this, the same amount of work would get it directly into their website. And so they could manage their website and maintain their website much more cost effectively. And I was really proud to teach them how to do that.
Well, I mean, it's a different mindset. You're looking for different work to do. You're not trying to do it for them. You're trying to show them how to do it, and then you can assist them in other ways.
Right. And then, of course, they didn't need me anywhere near as much. So I needed to find new things to do, which is part of the reason for the transition from what I was doing in the 2010s and to the 2020s to now. Is there's certainly people who would like to know how to build websites. I'd be glad to teach them, but
it's one of those things I know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. But
well, with respect to mentorship and growth, who's been your greatest mentor? You've mentioned a couple of people today, but what piece of advice did you get from a mentor that has been instrumental in your success and is part of what you do every day now?
The most important learning experience of my life, I think, was the 2 years of creative output, because the way they taught us to look at the world was so different and so much more powerful, and gives me such insight that I didn't have before. And it, in the website years, it was kind of dormant because the solopreneurs, it wasn't relevant to them, really. Not completely irrelevant in that, okay, you're a solopreneur and you have to do everything. Your time is your most precious commodity. You are an ongoing bottleneck. How do you manage your time? How can I help you manage your time? But it's nowhere near the same thing as when you have systems and processes, some of which are making your life better, and some of which are making your life worse, and how they're making your life worse is invisible.
All right. Well, I guess finally, legacy and impact. Looking forward, what legacy do you want to leave in the business world, and what impact do you hope your work will have on future entrepreneurs?
That's a very hard question. The legacy I hope to leave are happy customers with well-running businesses where the employees feel taken care of because some of the stresses of running a business are diminished. How that applies to other entrepreneurs, well, I'm happy to give advice to anybody who asks for it, but I haven't focused on that the same way.
All right. Well, speaking of giving advice, if someone is listening and would love to get some advice or get in touch with you, or maybe discuss a project, what are the ways to get in touch?
My email is fpiuck@cyberhenge.com, and my website is cyberhenge.com, cyberhenge. My phone number's on the website. I'm in LinkedIn. I'm barely in Facebook. Don't try to get me in Facebook. You can get me in LinkedIn. You can get me through my website, and one of the services I offer is a 1 hour interactive website review where the client and I will spend an hour looking at as much of the website as we can in an hour, and we'll record it and turn that into a report and a roadmap for improvement. And I'd be delighted to do that for anybody.
All right. Well, that is awesome. Well, I'm really excited that you joined us here on Inappropriate Growth. I want to remind everyone listening that if you really, really want to grow, chances are you're going to have to do something inappropriate. But thanks again, Mr. Frank. I appreciate you. And until next time, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome.